we watched us some wrestling to contest, some stuff that we've been meaning to check out for a very long time. I'm here with Professor Abelson and Scotland Green. How are you two doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Good to be back on Contesting Wrestling.
Yeah, we're happy to have you back, Scotland.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're happy to be back. It's been a while since we've recorded stuff. But our lives are crazy.
We're trying to get back into the swing of things. We'll see how successful we are, but we're recording here and now.
Yes. And so, okay, a little preamble about this episode. So at the beginning of the summer, we were going to do a whole series on CM Punk. And it seemed like the perfect time to do that. He won the AEW title. He was going to have this big run, it looked like.
Yes.
Punk once again.
And then a lot of shit happened.
He got hurt. He vacated the title. We didn't really have time to record over the summer anyway. And by the time we got back to it, he had returned. And during the time that I watched these matches again, that I rewatched these matches that we're covering today, he won the title and then, pissed off everyone in AEW, got into this big scuffle with the Elite, got suspended, stripped of the title. And by now it seems like he's not coming back.
What a story.
For real. We really don't know what's happening, but it really seems like he's not coming back.
Yeah. And it feels like, I don't know, people really don't want to hear about him right now. So, I hope that this episode is well received. But, I think it's kind of cool at the beginning of this, before it became clear, before kind of everyone turned on him about it. I thought this would be a cool thing to remind people why anybody cared about CM Punk to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think these matches, so we're covering the trilogy of matches from Ring of Honor in 2004 between CM Punk and Samoa Joe. And these matches had a lot to do, I think, with why anyone ever gave a fuck about CM Punk. Because, they're great wrestling matches. And I think a lot of that has sort of been forgotten. Even when he came back to AEW, he had some good matches and he showed that, he understood psychology in a way that most people in AEW don't. And, he had this kind of old school style, but these matches, I mean, they bear some resemblance to that, but he was at the cutting edge of pro wrestling at this time. And I think, it's good to remember that, whether you want to or not at this point, whether you're a CM Punk hater or not.
I was a CM Punk defender up until the last minute. People were hating on him before he came back. They were like, "Oh, this bitter thing," and I was on his side, and I went to some UFC bar and watched one of his terrible fights wearing a CM Punk shirt, a lime green CM Punk shirt at an MMA bar with a bunch of lunkheads. So I was on his team for a while, and now I'm off. But it seems like he just had his year in AEW was kind of like his entire career just put into 1 year. He had his meltdown, but he, instead of having a whole career first, he just had a year and then had his meltdown.
And his meltdown was, put him at odds with the locker room, as opposed to sort of his previous meltdown, which was kind of in solidarity, apparently, with the locker room. But, I was sort of, I would have defended him, and we still don't know exactly what happened in that room. But I was ready to defend him up until it became clear, or it became apparent, that he really kind of bullshitted about what happened there in that incident. But I don't know. We don't really know, because I was all with him on the scrum. I totally thought
I loved it. It was entertaining. I like those scrums
scrum.
Anyway. It's fun to just see people kind of skirt the line between a shoot, and it was nice to just see him kind of go nuts.
I maintain if the guys in the Elite could have just kept their cool and maybe talked to Tony Khan the next day about it instead of going directly after Punk, that the biggest money match they could do is Punk versus Page. But instead, they had to go deal with it at that moment, and everything came crumbling down. Of course, the Punk Page match wouldn't have happened anytime soon because Punk also tore a muscle in his match with Jon Moxley.
Yeah,
and
which
whatever
might have
happens,
led
he's
to
out
his
for months and
attitude.
months. Yeah, like that's the thing. He was in a lot of pain. He had a good match, and he doesn't understand a good number of things. His adrenaline was still flowing. He went from the ring to the scrum. And I think it's important to figure out like what the problems were specifically and what weren't the problems.
And I mean, it helps my position on, or like it helps my attitude in defending him, that I really kind of don't like the Elite and how their approach to wrestling and all of that. It probably wasn't a good idea to confront him in that way, but it does seem like, the way he reacted to the confrontation could have been better. But I don't know. Like, we don't know how much of the reporting that's coming out of what happened in that locker room is biased by, everybody around either being buddies with or having a vested interest in defending Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, But even now, like if they could all get their shit together, even now, when Punk comes back, he could be a monster heel and have huge matches with Adam Page and Kenny Omega and all of that, if they could just fucking do business. It's like watching that first episode of Tale of the Territories, and on the back, in the Memphis locker room, they had a sign that said personal issues draw money. Like they knew that if people didn't get along, that was actually good for business. But it doesn't seem like that's the attitude these days.
Well, Tony Khan was talking about that before all this, like literally in a couple of weeks preceding the pay-per-view. He was talking about how, some people in his locker room don't get along, and he thinks that's fine because historically that's made for very good television. The problem is you have to then get it to the ring, and you do have to you have to accept the fact that you're going to be working with some people you don't like, and that when you're done working with them, you can go home and not have to like them. And that's a lesson, I think, that goes way past wrestling sometimes.
And I think there's two things kind of getting in the way of all this. One is like, Punk seems to be like paranoid or feeling like people are attacking him personally and this and that. And two, Omega and the Bucks have an interest in not being like overshadowed by guys who can actually work big money matches, like draw money, like CM Punk. And
that is the greater conundrum of guys like Omega and the Bucks. It's not that they don't draw per se, but they don't draw like people who are, who were previously big stars in America, people with major WWE experience, people who have done big national television programs in America. Omega's done them in Japan. The Bucks, were kings of the indies. And I mean that in the best possible way. I've been to shows where it's like, I don't want to see the Young Bucks. And then they, put the Young Bucks on at the end because that's who everybody in the crowd came to see. And it's like, okay, well, you try doing that on a big scale, and they have. But it wasn't until Punk came along that the numbers started really busting up for AEW. So who knows?
Right now, they don't have anything that's of any real great interest except like MJF.
Right.
People want to see MJF win the title, and once he does,
other than that, it's the AEW fan base is a very like varied group of indie fans generally who all want their favorites in, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that doesn't fire up the rocket. You need a big star. Now we could go on about AEW for another hour and a half. But, I brought up how, the Bucks were the kings of the indies. Well, 18 years ago, CM Punk was the king of the indies and Samoa Joe was the king of the indies. And they had a series of matches that elevated both of their profiles along with the profile of Ring of Honor, to the point where, the effects are still being felt.
Yeah. Doc and I at the time were, and Scotland, I want to hear how you became privy to all of this as well. At the time, Doc and I were like, we had kind of exhausted our VHS tape collections. There wasn't enough wrestling each week on TV to satisfy our appetites. We were starting to get into the indies, and Mick Foley, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. Mick Foley had this like blog post or something where he like gushed about these 2 1-hour draws that had happened between these guys, CM Punk and Samoa Joe, and how awesome they were. And, and was promoting the third match, which was going to happen at the Rexplex in New Jersey. Edison? No.
I should know this.
Wait, I actually have it written down somewhere. Hold on.
Elizabeth, New Jersey, right?
Elizabeth, New Jersey. Yes, the Rexplex in Elizabeth, New Jersey, hometown of Jay Lethal.
Right.
Anyway, and we were like, oh well, let's definitely go to that.
Yeah.
So our first Ring of Honor live show was the third CM Punk Samoa Joe match.
All Star Extravaganza too. 4 hours. Amazing roster. Jim Cornette and Bobby Heenan, they are managing teams against each other for the first and I think the only time they ever did that.
Wow.
Yeah. And we covered that entire show. It was December 4th, 2004, ROH All Star Extravaganza 2. We actually covered that entire show on an earlier premium episode, so definitely check that out. I think it was interesting to watch this match again in light of the first 2 matches. And this is actually the third Punk Joe match is the first match we've ever covered twice in this podcast that did not feature Bret Hart.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a whole other thing. Bret's Bret, you can just keep watching and seeing new things.
So, Scotland, how did you hear about these guys, and when did you learn about this? And we'll talk about this more in a little bit. What I take to be possibly the greatest trilogy of matches in the history of pro wrestling. Anyway,
I heard about these matches on message boards, and I saw the first one years ago, and then I didn't see the other 2 until watching for this. And I have a big hole in my knowledge that's ROH. I would jump in every now and again and watch stuff. I remember the HD Net days, and I saw some of that. And but I never completely like followed the company, so it's all just random shows or random matches that I've seen. So I was excited to watch these. Rewatch the first one and then watch the other 2, and I knew the first one was a draw. I did not know the second one was a draw.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So I was watching it like,
that's special. Yeah.
That's
so
the fans
I tried
in
to go in
attendance,
as cold as possible,
The fans in attendance certainly didn't think they're going to do another hour-long draw,
I mean, I think maybe they thought they might. Like the fans at the first show had no idea that was going to happen. Had not an inkling.
Let me put some context on that. Like, I think the last hour-long draw in a major wrestling company was one of the Flair Steamboat matches, like almost 15 years before that. WWF in the Hogan days never did matches that went any longer than like the biggest main events were half an hour, maybe. WCW might have had a couple of longer matches, but not any no hour draws after.
Yeah, and as time went on, WCW did less and less stuff that would have gotten to that length.
And then the modern WWF style then in the early 2000s, like Triple H would do 25 30-minute matches. Him and Shawn Michaels did like 35 a little previously, but they didn't have the hour draw. They didn't have time limit draws at all.
They had the Iron Man match, if anything, where you knew it was going to go an hour.
Yeah.
But the modern indie style in 2004 certainly didn't lend itself to long matches at all. I mean, everyone was going at full speed, and that's part of what made this match so special, or these matches so special.
Even with that, Joe, as the Ring of Honor champion, most of his matches were 15-20 minutes because he was the big man destroyer type. He wasn't doing any really long matches anyway. All right, so that's the context. Punk is a different story.
Punk, if you had been following his career, if you were like a really hardcore indie mark at the time, which we were not, like this is way beyond us, you know, if you had been following his career in IWA Mid-South, you would have known that he went like 90 minutes with Chris Hero one time, you know.
Yeah, you can find that match. It's, you know, it is what it is. They go an hour and a half. It's ridiculous.
So as Punk and Joe talked about in the Straight Shootin' interview, which was recorded sometime in 2005, shortly before Punk left ROH, and we watched it back then, actually, when it came out, and that you can find that on YouTube. I rewatched it. I ended up rewatching the whole thing in preparation for this. But when they're talking about it, Punk's like, yeah, Joe was drunk, and we were talking about, you know, what to do for this match, because like Joe had killed everybody and Punk was starting to build some steam, and Joe didn't want to just kill him. So he was like, hey, how about we do, like, jokingly, how about we do like one of those hour draws like you did with Chris Hero? And Punk, and like before the words were out of Joe's mouth, Punk was on the phone with Gabe Sapolsky. Like, so we're going to do an hour. And Joe was like, wait, what? No.
Yep, better work on your cardio, Joe. Let's go.
Right.
But he could do it, you know. It's not like Joe didn't hang.
So this first match was in Dayton, Ohio, June 12th, 2004, at the ROH World Title Classic show, which was named after this match.
Right.
So this was Punk's first shot at the Ring of Honor title. He was the tag champ, right? It was a tag. Yeah, he was the tag champ for this match. And
right, with Colt Cabana.
Yep, he was a big with Colt Cabana. Yeah, and they were heels.
Right, they were the Second City Saints. You know, Punk's big thing was still, I'm straight edge, and that means I'm better than you. And Colt was his obnoxious little buddy.
Yeah.
And it worked really well.
Totally. People fucking hated him. Oh man, I wish I could find.
I need to see some of that. I haven't seen that period. You know, I know of the Second City Saints, but I don't think I've seen anything of it.
It's difficult to like get early Ring of Honor. It's not available legally anywhere. A big problem with it is that all of the music they used is unlicensed, licensed music, so it can't really be distributed. It's something I know Tony Khan is currently actively working on, because there's a demand for it. People want the catalog, but you can't just release the catalog. It's, you know, even when you find these matches on YouTube released in any official capacity, they mute or cut out the entrances entirely, which is a shame, but I understand why it happens. But yeah, if you're watching, it's a hell of a time commitment, but watching through like the first 3 to 4 years of Ring of Honor is just mind-meltingly incredible. The progress that's made. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they were really just starting to hit their stride at this point. They had weathered the storm of the Rob Feinstein scandal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Joe was in the middle of this tremendous reign. It was coming to the end of it, actually, but he'd already like passed, or was almost at 2 years at this point.
Well, by the third match, he was almost at 2 years.
Gotcha.
They didn't do the 3 matches in rapid succession or anything.
The second match happened fairly soon after the first one. They talked about that in the shoot interview, how they didn't want to do it so soon, but they had to, because I think something got, like TNA pulled their talent around that time.
Somebody got injured, or TNA pulled their talent, and they needed a main event for the show.
Oh yeah, I think actually Steve Corino was supposed to have a match,
right?
And like got hurt or something like that.
They all do love Steve Corino, staple of early Ring of Honor.
Yeah. This was the only conceivable replacement for Steve Carino in Chicago. That's what they said. Straight shooting. Because I think it was like supposed to be the big blow off with Carino and Homicide or something like that. Yeah. Which was a hell of a blood feud. Anyway, so they're gonna crown. They got this new belt, terrible new belt that they're gonna give to the winner, which is gonna be the ROH World Title. They're finally gonna call it a world title. Yeah, Les Thatcher, right?
I'd like to insert something here too. Guys like Les Thatcher and Jim Cornette and all that, they were on board with Ring of Honor. They were like, these young guys are doing a few too many moves for my taste. But this is pro wrestling where the WWE product is what the hell are they doing? And WCW sucked. And we're happy that somebody is bringing pro wrestling to the fans like this. Whereas today, if the same kind of stuff happened, you'd see the old generation of people complaining a little too much.
Maybe. But I don't know. It's not the same stuff. All right. Like ROH at the time had a kind of sensibility, not in all the matches.
No. But
in the main events, at least.
Yes.
Had a sensibility that is largely lacking in one major company in particular.
I think also a big thing is that Jim Cornette and a lot of those guys at this point make money complaining about modern wrestling.
Yeah,
and
this is true.
And back then they did not. They made money by being in wrestling still. So I think that might have something to do with it as well.
If you pay close attention to what Jim Cornette actually says these days, and I do, better or worse, when he likes stuff, like he likes the AEW stuff when it's good.
Oh,
like
yeah. He's not a complete hater.
Stuff. Yeah, he likes the same guys who he liked back in Ring of Honor. He likes Punk, he likes Danielson. He just doesn't like Kenny Omega.
As usual, he doesn't like anything that's been popular in the last 15 years. Great.
Perhaps. I mean,
or anything that was new. That's been his deal since the 90s at this point.
Oh, when he used to have those little work shoots on Raw when he just gave his opinion.
Yeah, he was right then. He was right.
He was right.
He was right then, for sure. Anyway. I mean, if you want to get into Cornette, the biggest problem isn't Cornette. It's the Cornette fans that take it upon. They have the big energy of the child that sees their parent scolding one of their siblings. So they decide they're just going to start scolding their siblings in the manner their parents do.
without understanding
without understanding why or authority structures. Or
it's perfect.
Whenever anybody comes onto Twitter and starts referring to any of the AEW guys with Cornette's pet names, I act dumb. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
Who is Twinkle Toes?
Who is Twinkle Toes? Kenny Omega, did you come up with that? Because that's fucking stupid. Calling him Harpo, like Harpo Marx, one of the greatest comedic actors of all time. That sounds pretty good. That's, because wrestling is a lot like silent film. Have you ever watched silent film? Oh, you haven't. I'd suggest you start okay, and then I start to get really
anyway. But one of the things, so to get back to this match, one of the cool things about it was at the time, it was all about high speed wrestling, big spots, big moves. And one of the things that fans hated, because there was an overabundance of it in like 90s wrestling to a large extent, and it was sort of coming back in the WWE style, which was slowing down a lot at the time, was rest holds, right? The rest hold was the great villain, according to the smart fans.
Right.
But damn if CM Punk did not utilize the headlock.
Yes.
To its greatest effectiveness in this match.
And Lewis would be proud.
And to give the ROH audience credit at this point, they ate it up. They didn't
completely.
They didn't love Punk in this match, but they started to get behind him. And every time they started to get behind him, he'd give them a reason to turn on him again. He'd poke Joe in the eye or do something like that, but they didn't hate the headlock stuff. It was smart wrestling, right? He put on a headlock, Joe would reverse somehow, Punk would reverse what Joe was trying to do, and then back to the headlock. They appreciated that it was smart wrestling.
Well, Punk certainly utilized the headlock a lot in this first match. He just kept going back to it. And then that's the psychology of going back to it, which works very well in a long match like this.
Definitely. Now they talk about in the Straight Shooting interview how they kind of ran out of stuff in this match. like the match is good, but knowing that they're going an hour, you can definitely tell that they're like killing time at various points. But they said that what really helped them and reinvigorated them was that whole incident with the fan at ringside.
Oh yeah, that was great.
So so Joe, like, he takes a swing at the fan, or like makes like he's going to take a swing at the fan, and the fan flinches.
Well, the fan is there in his CM Punk stuff,
putting
up like the straight edge X with his
he's got the X.
He's acting tough.
You know, he's the CM Punk fan, even though CM Punk is the heel in the building, and he's very pointedly it. And he throws up the X at Joe, and that's when Joe goes to hit him, and he flinches, and Joe doesn't swing at him. Joe starts laughing at him and walks away.
Everybody laughs at him. It's very funny.
And then Punk comes over and extends his hand, and then punks the guy out. He punked out his own fan, and that guy's life sucks
because Punk's a heel. Punk isn't trying to get his fans to like him. No, he's trying to be hated.
Yes.
So you go up to the guy who's for you, and you motherfuck him like that.
Fantastic.
And there you go.
Absolutely fantastic.
100%.
There's great like amateur style wrestling in this match. Chain wrestling. They, and they, as they also said in the shoot interview, they saved all the big stuff for the end.
Yeah.
They didn't give it away, and they built to it, and it wasn't like they didn't do any big spots. I mean, Punk hit the fucking Pepsi plunge. He hit the goddamn pedigree off the top rope.
Yeah.
And Joe rolled out of the ring. Right. So he couldn't pin him.
The Pepsi plunge is such a terrible idea for your knees. Oh my God.
He did it one time, right? Who did he did it on? MJF?
Oh. I think he did it on MJF. He knew if he was going to do it one time ever again in his career, that was the time.
Unless, he ever got that match with Triple H at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Which now I guess will never happen. Even if he went back to the...
He was going to get it, and he didn't want it.
No.
I mean, he didn't want the infection on his back to get any worse.
But I guess.
Yeah. But he didn't want his match with Triple H. He didn't care. That wasn't the point for him. I mean, if you talk about his exit from AEW, his exit from WWE, like if he had hung on and played the game another couple of years, he would have gotten his main events. But it was never really about that. I think what a lot of people fail to understand about the CM Punk exit from the WWE is that they're hung up on how he wanted the WrestleMania main event. He wanted money. He wanted to be paid like the actual top guys.
Yeah.
As he put it in his, famous interview with Cabana. Yeah, I made $1 million. I should have made 10. And that's what he wanted. He wanted, he knew who was making the big money.
Right.
He knew Triple H was making more than him. He knew John Cena was making way more than him. I bet you, and just off the top of my head, I bet you Randy Orton was making way more than him. And they never let him break into the very top echelon of earners like that. Because he never drew like all of those guys. Sorry to say, huge CM Punk fan. They gave him the belt, and then he's like, well, but there was another program more important than yeah. Listen, when John Cena was the US champion, he was more important than the Triple H matches and the JBL matches because he was over more than those guys, and that's why they went with him. You get over first, then they give you the top spot. It's, that's why when they gave Roman Reigns the top spot before he was over, it was such a disaster for years until he finally got it.
The funny thing is now Punk is in the position of the guy who actually deserves or did until just recently that top spot, and is trying to explain to all the guys beneath him, what that means.
Yeah. Like, come on, man. Don't heel your top babyface. Don't call John Cena the New York Yankees. Yeah, it's all very, somebody put together a video splicing an interview Punk did 10 years ago saying how he hopes that in 10 years when he's out of touch, somebody like one-ups him, and now it's 10 years later and he's like everyone in the history of the business. He's like, no, I'm the top guy, you see. So you all have to, yes, we know, anyone who's actually studied the business knows, but it's hard to see from the inside sometimes when you're trying to get that top spot.
By the way, I just want to mention the commentators on this match. So we've got Gabe Sapolsky as Chris Lovey. By the time we get to the second match, he's Jimmy Bauer.
Right.
Yeah, they're both just Gabe. And Mark Nutley.
The late Mark Nolte.
Yeah, who, I always hated. I thought he was a terrible commentator. Now I kind of appreciate him.
Yeah, he's all right.
He makes some apt observations.
I thought commentary did a good job of putting over like the historical nature of the match. I was feeling it.
Yeah, a note on that. So Nolte mentions that in the 50s, and match 3 he mentions this, but I'll say it now. In the 50s, the big rivalry was Rogers-Thez. In the 60s, Monsoon Sammartino, which I didn't actually know was a big rivalry, and I got to find those matches. I think he means like the great wrestling rivalries where they had like great matches.
Yeah, where they had several matches.
70s was Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk. The 80s was Flair and Steamboat. And he didn't mention the 90s. But, you could fill it in, Kobashi Misawa.
It was 2004.
Brett
It was
Shawn,
still the 90s.
Brett Owen. Right, it was still, it's still the 90s now.
Examine it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's still the 90s, but the 90s reached well into the 2000s.
All right, they were 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, they get towards the end of the match, and it seems like they're running out of stuff. They start doing some crazy shit, like Joe has Punk on the top rope, and it seems like they're trying to talk out the spot, but like Joe isn't really hearing it or whatever, and ends up just dropping Punk in a really dangerous looking reverse DDT. At one point, it's like, it looks like Punk is just like, just fucking go for it. It's like, all right. And, they work to the end, and the crowd was with it.
Yeah.
Right? It's a 1 hour draw. There's no winner, and they get a standing ovation.
Yeah, the crowd boos for half a second because there's no winner, but that's what that's what you expect. That's what happened. Yeah. And they realize what they just saw.
Yeah.
And the historical aspect of it. Yeah. And then Homicide comes out and ruins the whole thing.
Bullshit chant.
They did chant for 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
But it was funny because like they hadn't gotten the cadence of like 5 more minutes. It was more like, I don't know, like 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes.
It's one way to do it.
They had a clunky match of the year chant as well.
Right. Well, they were trying to figure that out for a while. The Ring of Honor audience was, the smart Mark Heaven, passing around observers in the crowd. It was really a moment in time where the new school of wrestling fan decided we're something else now, and you're going to have to deal with it. And they did.
I was excited when Homicide punched Dave Prazak.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Homicide comes out to attack, Joe and Punk after the bell.
Steals the belt, the new shitty belt.
Prazak comes in with the microphone, steps through the ropes. Homicide, what are you doing? Homicide just punches him in the face. There's not an interview happening. What are you doing? And he takes the belt and he leaves. Well, there's still the old belt there, thankfully.
Right. And in contrast to Homicide, who's the heel because he is so dishonorable, Punk and Joe shake hands. They make a big deal about how, this is the most important title in North America. And I guess this was sort of the beginning of Punk's face turn.
Yeah. He says, fuck anybody who tries to stop us.
Right. The Ring of Honor fan base was very into that. It's like, it's hard to think of it now, the way everything takes so long to happen. But Ring of Honor had only been a thing for about 2.5 years at that point. AEW has been around longer now.
And, you know, as opposed to now where AEW, you know, is bankrolled by a billionaire, or I don't know, multi-millionaire,
billionaire company,
you know, and, you know, they try to position themselves as this like upstart, you know, renegade promotion, but they're not, right? They're still a giant company. ROH was really this tiny little company that was taken on the big league, the one big league, the evil empire of the WWE. And the fans, you know, ECW had this as well. Like, it really felt like a renegade revolutionary.
Yeah, movie. It felt like the alternative too. There's a completely different style than the WWE style of 2004.
TNA at this point had their deal with like Fox Sports Net drawing, you know, not a lot of viewers.
Oh yeah, I checked out some of that too.
Yeah, it wasn't bad necessarily, but it seemed very WWE light or WCW light, like it did for
they could never stick with their own identity. They kept changing it up. That's one of the things I like about TNA, is that you can check in every year and it's a different show.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, watching TNA that whole time, it was like, or not the whole time, but we
weren't watching TNA at that time.
Not at that time. No, we started really when Joe went, right? In like 2005.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, when they got a better TV deal, as soon as we could. Well, I mean, we started watching TNA as soon as it was viable, really, for us to watch it.
I watched those weekly pay-per-views.
Oh yeah,
at the beginning. I had a friend who like had a box or something, so I went over to someone's house and watched the first few of those. So I've
seen the first like 6 or 10 of them.
Some of that shit does not hold up.
Oh my god!
What's Russo booking the whole time, right?
And it's also just like very Southern in its race aspects.
Oh yeah,
some of that, yeah.
And then there's the Flying Elvises.
Yeah, Sonny
Siaki, man, and Jimmy Yang.
And the third guy, Jorge Estrada.
Right, Jorge Estrada.
Somehow I know the Flying Elvises.
Yeah, they were that combination of willing to go there with the angle where Ron the Truth Killings won the NWA title while claiming that there had been racial discrimination in the wrestling business the whole time against black people. But they were also the kind of company to make that unquestionably the heel character.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, we talked about this quite a bit in our episode on Our Truth. So go back and check that out if you haven't heard it. Cool. Yeah. So, all right, now we get to October. It's weird because it was like, it was 4 months. It was 4 months between them. So it wasn't that short of a time, the way that Punk and Joe make it seem. But it was, I guess, fairly soon. So October 16th, 2004, now in Chicago, is the rematch. Oh, wow. So, you know, it had the differentiating factor of Punk being hugely over in Chicago. Like, he wasn't full babyface yet, but they loved him in Chicago. So the crowd is way behind Punk in this one.
And he had by now fully turned babyface, correct?
Yeah. Had he?
Well, there was the whole thing with Ricky Steamboat and
right,
and Homicide. You know, the Rottweiler. No, not the Rottweilers. Generation Next was going to beat up Ricky Steamboat, and CM Punk was only I can attack Ricky Steamboat.
Right. Got you. Okay, so yeah, so you know, it's a different match for that. For you know, Joe's the one working heat during it and all that. The two of them were apparently super beat up going into this match. Joe had like some huge lump on his leg or something. And Punk's back was fucked up. Apparently, they talk about in the shoot interview, they were both like laid out in the back with like ice on them, like laying across these tables, calling the match. And like Gabe would come in every few minutes and be like, so how's it going? So how's it going? And be like, it's fine.
Wow.
And then they ended up improvising most of it anyway when they went out there.
Well, you know, they said before they left the curtain, Gabe was there, and just to rib Gabe, one of them turned to the other one and said, "Yeah, I kind of forgot everything we called. You want to just go out there and do whatever?" The other one said, "Yeah, I'll see you out there." And they looked at Gabe, and then they went to the ring. Anyway, this match is definitely better than the first one. They were more, you know, despite the fact that the match was announced shortly before the match happened, they were more prepared, I think, to do the hour. The characters work better. Both of them are more over. Joe's title reign had gotten so long that every single one of his title defenses was a huge deal. Also, Punk was kind of clearly the other most over guy. It seemed like after their draw, he would be the one to beat Joe for the title. And then they go another hour.
Which I did not know. I was very surprised.
This match is the one that blew up and that people talked about. Meltzer gave it 5 stars.
And it was the first match in North America since what was the last one?
I think the first Hell in a Cell, maybe.
The first Hell in a Cell, the Michaels Undertaker Hell in a Cell.
Rarely gave North American. He was not a fan of the style for many years in North America, as opposed to, in Japan, especially for, again, a company that had been around for 2.5 years with these 2 indie guys that nobody had heard of, unless you were really dialed in, unless you were buying the tapes, unless you were in the Northeast into the Midwest watching these guys. And Meltzer's popularity had grown significantly by then. He was, mainstream enough in the wrestling sphere, and people were like, well, what the fuck, how come I don't know these guys? How come I've never heard of them? I have to see this match. So people bought Joe Punk 2, which ended up being the name of the show, to see this match and to expose themselves to these guys.
Now, this will come as no surprise to most fans, but if you watch that shoot interview with Punk and Joe, Punk comes off as a little bit conceited.
he thinks rather highly of himself.
He's like, he quite often will refer to something they did as genius, or that he came up with, and he thinks when they ask, like, well, is there anything you would have done differently in this match? He's like, no, I think it was a great match. But the one thing that they do say about it is there weren't any real time benchmarks. Like the ring announcer didn't say like when they had 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever until the very end. They didn't really have that kind of countdown. So I think they didn't really know where they were time-wise towards the end, which is why they have those 2 really long top rope spots.
Yeah. They knew the finish was going to happen.
They do the one, and then they realize, shit, it's not yet. All right. And they do like a superplex or whatever, and then they go back up, and then it's the fisherman that finally lays them out as time expires at the end.
Yeah, Joe basically does the muscle buster from up there, but he can't make the cover.
Right. Yeah, I guess that was supposed to be the muscle buster.
Yeah, well, then the first match, Punk hits the Pepsi plunge, and in the second match, Joe hits the muscle buster off the top and just couldn't get it. And there you go. But yeah, they don't have to rely on trying to find a fan to mess with for this one. These are 2 guys at the top of their game with something to prove, but more they feel like they've proven they can do it. So they wanted to prove that they could do it the best. And they totally did. They completely, what can you say about Joe Punk 2 that hasn't already been said, other than it's incredible and you should watch it. Doesn't feel like an hour, as all great hour-long matches don't, because then you're surprised that it's almost over. And
I like how the commentators, like 2/3 of the way through, are like, you know what, we're gonna go watch this as fans now.
Yeah,
like the action.
Yeah, it was 15 minutes left. They dipped out.
What Gabe knew very well, that his commentators were fine, but they weren't like super incredible. including himself.
Yeah. Also, he could do this kind of thing because the commentary was not recorded live.
Right.
So they knew what was happening. They knew how good it was. And so he could, kayfabe that they were leaving the booth,
Like if you watch the Joe versus Kobashi match, there's no commentary on it at all. And that was Gabe making that call, like, we're not putting it on. And Prazak and like Lenny Leonard or whatever were kind of salty about that, but they weren't better than Joe and Kobashi.
No, the ROH commentary was never as good as it should have been given the product. Prazak, I guess he was fine. I liked Gabe as Jimmy Bauer. I liked him because he was clearly taking a page from Vince McMahon on WWF Superstars,
Getting to explain his own stories.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so Scotland, you said you'd never seen this second one before. What are your thoughts on this?
I loved it because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I felt like I was truly invested in this one and the third one. And now that you tell me that they were kind of wasting time, so to speak, in the first one, like I could tell that this one they weren't. This one they had more idea of where they were going, and it was great. Also, like the big difference in the crowd being behind Punk in this one. It made a lot of fun moments, like when Samoa Joe bails to the outside, the crowd chants, "Punk is going to kill you."
Yeah. Nice.
I thought that was neat.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
And what really makes these three matches so great too is that they really do build one upon the other. Like the headlock stuff that Punk does in the first one, it's a little bit different in the second one, and then in the third one it doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I love the stories between them, and I'm glad I watched them in close succession. I didn't watch them like literally in a row, but it was like, I didn't watch them on the same day. I had a day to kind of, have time elapse, and then I watched the next one, and I love how they built on each other, and they had counters to things that worked in the previous matches. I'm a big fan when stuff like that happens.
Yeah, there's the spot that's in the first two matches where Punk comes off the apron with a Rana and Joe catches him and swings him into the guardrail.
Yes. That was great.
And then the third match, Punk hits a drop kick.
That nasty drop kick.
Nails him.
Yeah.
Instead of the Rana. Joe's expecting the Rana. Yeah, really, really good stuff there. So this third match from All Star Extravaganza 2, December 4th, 2004. And, we're going in there like, are they going to do another hour draw?
Yeah.
Like, and they knew from the beginning, like they say in the shoot interview, that they knew the one thing they weren't going to do was going to go another hour.
Yeah.
They advertised it as a no time limit match.
Oh, right.
No time.
So will it go 90 minutes?
Yeah, I like that.
That was part of what drew us to the show. We had heard of the 2-hour draws, and we thought that was a great idea because we knew how unusual that had been. And the little exposure to the indies we had seen, all the indies were just basically trying to be ECW 2. And that wasn't going to work. So we figured, okay, this is not just ECW 2. Let's check it out. But yeah, they didn't do 90 minutes. It would have been a bad idea. And that's the genius of Gabe's booking, though. He knew not to do another hour, but he knew to say that an hour wasn't going to end the match.
Yeah.
Because people, I don't think, wanted to see a 3 hour long draw. Maybe they wanted to see a super long match, but they wanted a damn winner.
They wanted a winner, yeah.
And I will point out, elsewhere on the card, they do a 15-minute draw.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Was Loki and Austin Aries? Yeah. For the number one contender spot.
Right.
Interesting.
And I don't know if that was by design or just another instance of Loki not wanting to do the job.
I think it all fit together well. So let me break this down because I love this as far as just indie booking for Scotland here. So presumably Loki didn't want to do a job to Austin Aries because he didn't want to do a job to fucking anybody. And but they couldn't just give him the title again because then he wouldn't lose it to anybody. So they have him and Aries face each other, number one contender match. Right. They go 15 minutes. They ring the bell. Fine. And the crowd's chanting 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, and so on. And Aries is encouraging it, and Loki's ambivalent or whatever. And they have Gary Michael Capetto, who's doing the ring announcing, come out. And he said, this is just a great way to put this. He's like, we heard from the back. And then the Booker in Ring of Honor says that we will only have 5 more minutes if the fans want it. And the fans cheer and they chant really hard, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. And Loki gets the microphone and Aries is in the ring like, yeah, let's go. And Loki gets the microphone and he's like, you want 5 more minutes? And everyone cheers. And he's like, you want 5 more minutes? And everyone cheers. And he goes, well, I've been paid for a 15-minute match, so fuck you. And he throws the microphone down and he leaves. So they announce after this show that since Loki didn't accept the match length, that they were going to give the title shot to Austin Aries because he at least wanted to keep fighting. And then at the next Ring of Honor event at Final Battle 2004, Aries beats Joe and wins the title in a huge shocker. A huge shocker.
Yeah.
And that's really good booking as far as I'm concerned, because that creates a lot of intrigue and, you know,
in so many different ways. Like, people thought Punk would win the title in this match.
Right.
I did. I really, really did.
Yeah, it seemed logical after those 2 matches. Punk wins the title.
Yeah. I wrote that down.
But
like,
no,
the
next show, Aries win. Aries, who had never had a shot before, was a virtual unknown.
Yeah, he had come up in this, like, that year in Ring of Honor. His stock had been rising, and that's like it. You know, he was never in WCW. He wasn't like, you know, an indie darling. He was a guy that Gabe saw had a lot of talent, which he did. You know, I mean, you think of Austin Aries now and he's who he is now, but like at the time, you know, the difference between 2000s Austin Aries and 2010s Austin Aries is very different. And 2000s Austin Aries was one of the most explosive, you know, high energy guys on the indies who knew how to have a good damn match. And Gabe saw it. And then they did then do a non-title match between Aries and Loki.
Don't say it because we're after having done this episode, I do want to one day begin a series where we watch the whole summer of Punk, beginning with The Future Is Now.
Okay.
So
I mean, I'm down.
Well, wait, we'll leave it on that cliffhanger for Scotland.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
So this match, it starts off, they're doing all the evasions, like all of Joe's kicks that were so effective in the first match. Punk evades, Joe evades the headlocks, and then 10 minutes in, they just go balls to the wall and start hitting all of their big shit. Punk gets bloodied, and Joe kind of turns heel, right? Like, Joe is so frustrated that he can't fucking put this guy away.
Yeah.
You know, he chokes out Punk and Punk's hand drops 3 times, but then Ricky Steamboat won't let them ring the bell because Punk has recovered, which is questionable.
It's a good spot, I guess, but yeah, it's a little questionable.
But
the fans came along with it.
Fun for the live crowd, but watching it back, you're like, that's a little suspect.
The crowd is already starting to turn on Joe, and then Joe puts his feet on the ropes and trying to pin Punk. And the crowd completely turns on him, starts chanting, "Fuck you, Joe." Like, you got to understand the context of this. You know, this was at a time when it was still, the indies were still full of, and I guess they still are today, but it was still the big, you know, style was the ECW, blood and guts, like, do whatever you can, like weapons. And the idea that the crowd would turn on their favorite in a lot of ways and boo them just because they took the advantage of putting their feet on the ropes was a testament to how how important honor was to the ROH crowd.
And once you have that, it makes your heels and your faces make sense and mean something, because everyone has that one rule. You know, the honor is something that is real in Ring of Honor.
Yeah. And so this idea came from Ricky Steamboat. Steamboat came up to them in the back and was like, "Hey, Joe, why don't you put your feet on the ropes at some point? And they were like, he walked away and they were like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. There's no, why would we ever do that? And then they left. And then like 15 minutes later, they see each other and they're both like, hey, you know that thing that Ricky Steamboat said, let's do it. It's genius. And it was. We popped to it when we saw it live. I remember that very distinctly. Remember the reaction from the crowd. And like that had a big effect on me in terms of, you know, like one of my favorite things about Ring of Honor at the time was the audience. That's still, I think, my favorite wrestling crowd in all my time watching wrestling was the Ring of Honor audience up until around 2007, 2008, when they started to become more popular. So yeah, after the spot where Joe puts his feet on the ropes, like he's really desperate. He goes off the top rope. I think that's the only time I've ever seen him do that. And he almost kills CM Punk doing it because Punk doesn't quite move out of the way. His knee lands on his head or whatever. And then in the end, Punk goes for O'Connor roll and Joe grabs him in the choke out of it, hits him with a German suplex, then a dragon suplex, and Punk is dead and finally goes down to the choke. Fucking Joe wins.
I could not believe it. I was like, wait, what? Like, first I thought Punk was going to win the second match. I was like, all right, they might do a little trade situation. And then I was like, nope, okay, well, third match, here we go. Nope, I was shocked.
Punk didn't win very often in ROH until his title run at the end of his time there. Which, by the way, is funny because the way the shoot interview ends, like Punk is really still talking. And this is only a month or two before he left. He's still talking as if he has no interest in the big companies and like he's happy to like, you know, perform his art down in ROH. But he jokes, he's like, yeah, you know, I was going to win the belt because I'm Triple H. I built this place. I run the school, but I still suck and I'm sloppy, you know, which is of course the criticism he was getting.
And his win-loss record, like you mentioned, wasn't so great. And the Ring of Honor fans were super into the win-loss records. Like, well, why is he getting a title match? He didn't win in a bunch of matches before his title match. This is where I've pointed out on this show before, but I'm going to point out here. The thing with Ring of Honor was not that it was a straight wrestling league that brought everything back to the traditions of wrestling. Ring of Honor, because those traditions didn't really exist in the first place. Ring of Honor's gimmick was that it was a throwback wrestling league.
Yeah.
That was the basis that they would tell stories with. In fact, Ring of Honor was extremely modern at the time, and that was what made it so good, that it was able to balance all of that, which is one of the reasons why a lot of the old timers really loved it, because they bought the angle, which is, you know, one of the reasons why once Jim Cornette started booking it, it got so boring, because he ran it like it was an old school wrestling league trying to bring back the traditions of old wrestling. No, don't do that. Don't do that. No, give CM Punk the match, even though he didn't win a bunch of matches, because nobody really cares. And the people complaining, that's just engagement anyway. That's what you want. And then if he wins the title, you know, make them hate him and all of that good stuff. But if you listen to that shoot interview, the main reason he didn't want to go to the WWE is because he thought he made more money on the indies than taking a developmental deal. And I don't know what the developmental deal he eventually got was, but he wouldn't have taken it if he wasn't making more money in OVW than he would have been making in Ring of Honor. And like, it seemed like he was in OVW forever, but he was in OVW for like a year and change until that
stuff's really good, by the way, too.
I've seen some of it. I've put some of it on my Twitch show. I watched stuff with CM Punk and the Spirit Squad.
The formation of the Spirit Squad in OVW is very interesting. It makes the whole Spirit Squad thing make a lot more sense than if you just saw them show up on Raw one day fully formed.
Well, that's Heyman for you.
That stuff.
Like, change all these guys into cheerleaders. All right, that's what we're gonna do.
By the way, since you mentioned it, Scotland's or Mr. Green Mist's Pro Wrestling Potluck is now on YouTube.
Yes.
You post the episodes on YouTube.
So I do the live shows on Thursday nights, and then they go up on YouTube early Saturday morning. Saturday morning wrestling is back.
Every time you post on Instagram, I see it and I'm like, holy shit, I want to watch this show. And one of these days, I'm going to sit and get really high and fucking binge all that shit. One of these days when I have time to do anything.
Yeah, the YouTube show is perfect for that. It's because I know it's hard for people to get, on the live. I like doing it live, having
I don't know what a Twitch is. I don't know how any of that
I've
works.
heard you say that on commentary.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's opened up, it's got me some new viewers and new people watching the show, and some people have found the show through YouTube and then come watch the live one on Thursday. So it's nice. Yeah.
Scotland must, of course, be referring to the video game league commentary that I've done at some point in the past. I think.
Right.
I don't know if I mentioned Twitch there, but anyway.
It's not suspicious at all that you didn't just let that go.
Anyway, one thing I wanted to say about this last Joe Punk thing that I forgot to say earlier is that the hell of an entrance from Punk. And now I finally get the reference of his AEW entrance that he did with the same music that everyone was so excited about.
Oh my God. His entrance was something else.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a big presentation. They can't, we saw it on like Daily Motion or something, but they can't put it on anything official. There's no way to find it right now.
Yeah. I watched it on Daily Motion.
Yeah. The first two, the first match is on like official ROH YouTube.
Right.
Yes.
The second match, someone uploaded to YouTube and they're just letting it go. And the third one is on Daily Motion.
Yeah. The second one has no entrances.
If you can
I guess that's made it easier.
If you can get your hands on it, the ROH did release years and years ago the Joe Punk trilogy as a DVD with all 3 matches on it. But that's not in print. It hasn't been in print for years.
Yeah, it's probably on billybilly.com, the Chinese it's a Chinese YouTube clone that I use stuff for my show. It's anything.
I've seen some things on there, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Punk Jamie Noble match is on there, which
oh yeah, probably
I'd like to, which is part of the summer Punk. All that. Anyway, great series of matches. If you want to see CM Punk when he actually was again a cutting edge wrestler in his prime, these are really the matches to watch.
Oh, yeah. He was absolutely dynamite. He was unlike anything anybody had ever seen.
Yeah.
Just his character.
And Joe.
Oh, Joe.
Like, Joe is still great, but for the size he was, and he wasn't as big as he is now. But he was a big guy who could move like crazy, just super fast. The stamina that he had for his size, being able to do these hour-long draws and all of that, like he was kind of the ultimate professional wrestler at the time.
And he had a great like mean look that you believed, like, and a mean style that you believed that he was a dangerous man.
Yeah, and he had, something about his like Elvis hairdo too, like gave him kind of the throwback look a little bit too.
Yeah.
With, but also he, didn't look like anything you'd seen before. He was a Samoan, but he wasn't anywhere near.
He wasn't one of those
savage. Stereotype Samoans.
He was Samoa Joe.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't in the family. But
he's the only one not in the family.
You talk about Samoa Joe like he's a bystander in these matches, but that's only because he was such a constant. Joe was probably the best wrestler in North America in 04 and 05. And he's been chasing that ever since. He keeps getting injured, and there are a lot of the career of Samoa Joe is an interesting piece of analysis to be done. But if there had been multiple large wrestling companies in the early 2000s, Joe would have been on top of one of them. but there wasn't.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And the one that existed was still really obsessed with abs and bodybuilders.
He should have been the king of TNA.
He really
Yeah,
should.
his first year at TNA was great up until the Angle, Kurt Angle coming in, and then he kind of had nothing to do after that, and then they painted his face and made him into a goofball.
Well, the years of peak Samoa Joe that TNA wasted are a crime against humanity.
It's a fucking bummer. Yeah,
it really is. Oh God. Well, there you have it, Samoa Joe. I'll always be a big fan.
Yeah, by the way, we left that show, me being a huge Punk fan and Doc being a huge Joe fan.
Right.
Ah, lovely.
That
good car ride home.
Yeah.
We were hooked immediately.
Train ride.
Yeah. But yeah, we were hooked immediately. We started going to all the Ring of Honor shows we could. We started watching all the Ring of Honor shows we could find. Joined the Ring of Honor message board, which was the main thing at the time. And people are still talking about the Ring of Honor message board.
It's hard to explain how much that message board meant, and how the thrill of being on the message board the night that there was a show in some town we couldn't get to, and just like refreshing to get the live results.
Right.
Because we weren't going to be able to actually see it for months. There weren't going to be any clips posted on social media. There was no social media.
No.
Right.
And then
once we read the results, we just had to kind of like imagine what it looked like, and get excited for the next time they would be in our town. And like, what were the matches that were going to be booked? Because every show was unique, Wow.
I'm so jealous that you guys had good wrestling in your area.
we did.
I'm from New Orleans. We didn't have good wrestling after the 80s in New Orleans.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's why you had to watch the TNA pay-per-views.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was a day one TNA viewer.
That's great.
All right. Well, we shall see. I mean, we're probably going to continue this series on CM Punk. Eventually, we'll get to the next one. And, because we had a whole plan for him. We have guests lined up for all these future episodes.
A series of unfortunate events have been unfolding. So we'll just keep weathering the storm.
Absolutely. In 8 months, who knows? Maybe he'll show up in WWE.
We really don't know.
That's
the thing. People think they know. They don't know shit.
There's all sorts of rumors. People saying, to me, it's hard for me to imagine him coming back to wrestling at this point. But I felt that way, when he fucking got killed in UFC too. So, and people are saying that, no, he has the wrestling bug again. And like, he wants to do it. I don't know.
That's what it really comes down to. I think if he wants to wrestle, he's gonna, and if he
someone will book
he's
him.
Not right.
Yeah.
Will he become the guy who joins an even smaller league so he can unquestionably be the top guy? Will he join the WWE where they'll pay him huge money and he'll have to eat some shit? It
would be kind of the best is if, Khan really puts a lot into Ring of Honor and really tries to revitalize Ring of Honor as a brand, and Punk shows up there.
Right.
That would be rad.
And like becomes the champion of his little molehill,
his Ring of Honor. He can wrestle Bryan Danielson every week until the end of time.
I'll watch it.
Oh yeah, me too. Don't think I won't.
All right. Thanks everybody for continuing to tune in for Contesting Wrestling.
Yeah.
And this is a premium episode, right?
Sure, we may be restructuring that soon. We'll see how it goes.
So if you're listening to this, you're still giving us money, which is awesome because we need it to keep doing this.
Sure.
So
no, we do. We got server fees.
Yeah, we got server fees, and Evan isn't going to pay them anymore.
That remains to be seen. But yes, we have to take that off of his plate. Evan's doing well. He has a baby. He doesn't ever have to watch wrestling again. And,
he tapped out.
He tapped out.
Sure did.
He sure did.
Big time. He tapped out. He tapped out.
He tapped out.
But we have a lot of plans for like cool stuff coming up.
Yep.
So Stay tuned.
In Scotland, you talked a little bit about your show. You want to give the proper plug before we sign
Oh
off?
yeah. My show is Pro Wrestling Potluck. It's a live weekly wrestling mixtape that I host. I get viewer submissions, and I also have my own little flights of fancy, and I put together an episode every week. Sometimes they have themes. We had a Halloween episode, we had a Labor Day episode, and then other times they just kind of a theme will be found. And so every Thursday night on my Twitch, 9:00 Eastern Standard Time, Mr. Green Mist. And then check me out on YouTube. That's where all the old shows live. And yeah, those are all fun, and they're fun to just put on and get stoned.
All right.
There you go. That's as good of a selling point
right?
as can work on me. So
okay, so we're going to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. For Scotland Green, Mr. Green Mist, for Professor Benjamin Abelson, I'm Doc Diamondfire. Thank you all for listening. This has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you.
Peace.
Thank you all for listening. This has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you.
Peace.